Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with my friend Alfonso Rachel, and this is the Virtue Signal, where we talk about kind of the philosophy and morality, not just behind politics, but behind life in general. And Zoe, I don't mean to be, a downer today, but today I thought I'd talk about something that I know a lot of people are feeling. For me personally, I've always been an animal lover, and before I got married, I had a couple of cats, and they were really pretty much my family. I found out one of them's got terminal lymphoma now. So today I thought maybe we could talk about grief and how people handle grief, not out of sympathy for me so much, or at all, really. Just that as I was thinking about this as a possible topic, I realized that's a emotion that a lot of people are experiencing right now for the country and for the values that the country's built upon and all of the sacrifices were made. There's a lot of anger, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of worry, but there's also a lot of grief, just plain grief. And I thought maybe we could talk about that. I know you're obviously a person of very, very strong religious beliefs, and that certainly's got to help a lot. But do you have any advice on how you can cope with like the day-to-day, minute-to-minute feeling of just general awfulness that is the essential quality of grief?
Sure, man, yeah, I feel these people, man, who go through these, yourself or anybody else. We have our pets, man. Sometimes we call them our fur kids and stuff like that. My buddy, man, my baby was Donut, and she passed away a little while ago. And how we deal with things like that, whether it's your pets and I know it's not PC to call them our pets, they're our pets.
That's what they are.
But whether it's your pets or it's your family member, your loved ones, your friends, these things, man, they really suck. All right. And here's the deal. How do I cope with things like this? I realize that this is earth. This is not heaven. Right. We were warned about how these things happen right from the get-go. And I know that a lot of folks, they tend to believe that the word of God, if the question is, how do I cope? How I cope is that I accept the fact that the account of the word of God is exactly that. It's an account. It's not just a story. If they're just stories, that would mean that any comfort that we're seeking is just a story. So there can never really be true comfort. There can never really be true resolution. So I have to accept that, well, if comfort is something that we desire, I don't believe in the word of God just to give myself some sort of anesthetic. I understand that these are things that we desire. We want a place where we don't have to deal with the grief of death, hunger, poverty, toxic relationships, and all these sort of things. We have a desire to be removed of these things. The first commandment is, I am the Lord your God that brings you out of Egypt. This is a law. It's not just a statement, it's a law. Because when the Lord says, I bring you out of Egypt, the word Egypt itself means oppression. It means the house of slavery. God's law is that we are free. And I mean free from everything, free from, like we talked about, free from oppression, free from disease. Disease is oppression. The most oppressive faction grief is oppressive also. So God doesn't even want us to be oppressed by these things. The most oppressive faction there is death itself. And that is something that the Lord has sworn in blood that he will free us from. So I can't, if I take this as some story or allegory, then I can never possibly have a true sense of comfort or confidence. That would mean that itself, I'm just telling myself a story in that, well, I guess I should be comfortable in these things. Now, some would say that time heals all things. It's going to take time to get through these things.
Well, it absolutely does.
Right? Now, which is fitting because the Lord himself refers to himself as time. I am the Alpha and the Omega. I am the beginning and the end. So all these things that we're looking for reside with him personally. He is the person who has sworn in blood. It's like, if I could just say this really quick, Bill.
Sure.
God himself has made it assured to us. He has represented himself in the natural, where the natural itself, and natural comes in behavior, and it's natural for us to have inclinations and questions about things. That's natural behavior. Well, God himself, being the supernatural creature not creature, forgive me, I didn't mean to say that. The being that he is, has made a creature to represent in nature. That way nature can not say that you have no jurisdiction over us because you're not one of us. So God has represented himself in nature and has given his blood to say that I am absolutely justified to bring the perfect atonement for you and design the place for you where you are fully liberated from these things that bring you grief. I am fully qualified. It has always spoken of me to bring the perfect judgment against the things that have caused you grief, those who have used their intelligence without justification to bring you grief, whether it is a person or whether it is death itself, even death, because the Lord is not just a personality, he's a place, right? The kingdom is a personality, the same way death is. Death, referred to as Hades. Hades is not just a person. Hades is a kingdom. Both will be cast into prison. So this justice is going to be fully taken care of. We can't do it on our own. We can't resolve it on our own. The more we try, the worse it gets. There's only one who is qualified to make that atonement, pass that judgment, and to bring us into this place that he's prepared for us long ago.
It's no surprise to long-term listeners that I've been fighting clinical depression pretty much all my life, and that's unrelieved anyway, without the many reliefs that are available out there, is a state of near perpetual grief. And one of the things that I've always struggled to deal with, that I know to be true, and that I've been told many times, is that sadness and grief they're real. They're real emotions, and just because they're unpleasant doesn't mean you cannot or should not feel them. That it's okay, to be sad, and not just okay to be sad in kind of the Saturday afternoon special kind of. It's okay to be sad. I'm talking about something much bigger than that. Something that it's part of. The very first thing you said was that we live on Earth, and this is what life on Earth is, and it is a part of life on Earth, and it's a big part of life on Earth. And I actually think, that on some level, modern Americans live in a life that is so, relatively speaking, grief-free compared to everybody who ever came before us, and compared to virtually everybody else in the world. We have so little experience with genuine grief compared to other people that it makes me wonder if we're not oversensitized to it. This is kind of the question. So if grief is pain, then the question is a person who is in constant pain, do they have a higher pain threshold than somebody who's very rarely in pain? Do you see where I'm going with this? In other words, 100 years ago, right here, if you had 10 kids and 7 of them made it to adulthood, you were doing real well. So if you lived in a time when you might lose 3 or 4 half of the children that you have, did those people, do you think, feel the grief as strongly as somebody who loses an only child, or is it simply that they just took more of it? They just took more.
Well, even a person who, because people can be addicted to many things. And some people are straight up addicted to their grief. They can be addicted to misery.
That's true.
A lot of times, even with misery, can come like the martyr complex, a person who can show that they're either in control, even when their life is just out of control. It's almost like a drug addict. A lot of times, and I've grown up around my share, and a lot of times they'll keep themselves in a state of misery, keep themselves in a stupor, and they want to show how much drugs they can take or how much they can drink to show that they're in control of it. I can control my high and all that sort of stuff. I can control being drunk. I can get drunk and get behind the wheel and stuff like that. So people will do the same thing in their misery. And it's like I said, it's kind of like this martyr complex where I'm able to take so much. And it shows that they've got this integrity, or this is how they validate their existence. We can see that playing out the culture right now, as we've got like all these SJW narratives and stuff, like everybody out there trying to be the superlative on victimhood. They're an empowered victim, if we can dig that oxymoron, right? So there's a lot of people who will dig into their depression. They validate themselves with their depression. And of course, it's not healthy. It's self-oppression, as a matter of fact. And like we said, about the Lord, these things are a sin to the Lord because the Lord detests oppression. He hates it. Some people try to say, well, the Bible condones slavery and stuff. Like, no, it doesn't. Evidently, they didn't read that Exodus story. And the Word of God says flat out that if anybody tries to oppress another person, tries to, take them by force or make a market of them, they're to be put to death. So the Lord frowns on slavery profoundly. And like I said, even if it's the slavery of the self-slavery of keeping themselves in depression, the Lord gives refuge of these things. But just like anything else, Bill, it takes discipline. It takes humility to be able to do these things. A lot of people who are in their depression, they are really broken down, but the fine line to it is that they may be very broken down, even humiliated, but the thing that's keeping them from getting past their humiliation and being able to deal with it is that other side of the problem of pride. Because pride, like I said, when they get addicted to this being a victim and being a martyr, the pride factor is in there. So
that's right. And it becomes an identity issue. In fact, that's who I am. I'm a sick person.
Yes.
That's my entire identity is for people who are hypochondriacs or people who are in fact with general medical conditions, to some degree, people will make that their identity. I'm the sick friend who can't go on the picnic. That's who I am. And I'm really glad you mentioned like drinking and drugs, because drug addiction, alcohol addiction, any addiction, video game addiction, sex addiction, gambling addiction, all addiction is the obsession with something that can give you some degree of pleasure in order to medicate the perpetual state of pain that you're in. That's what addiction is. When you ask people why they can't stop being drug addicts, even though it's killing them, the reason that they can even ask that question in the first place is because they're not in a state of perpetual pain, and they don't realize that particular addiction is an escape, or a refuge, just even a recess. And of course, they know, drug addicts know as well as everybody else knows, that the results of the addiction make it worse. But sometimes the pain's just so overwhelming that they simply, it's irresistible. I've been in physical pain, major physical pain, twice in my life. I had an ingrown tooth once at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night, and I was curled up in a ball on a baseball field on wet grass for about 2-3 hours. And I had a kidney stone once, and it took them about 4 hours for them to really get to me. And they gave me, first they started me on liquid, Tylenol, which was, I thought, hilarious. And then they moved their way up to some serious like Demerol, and that didn't do it. And finally, I had an intravenous drip going, and finally, after about 4 hours of just being completely unmanned, I mean, really, just mewing, you're just a puddle of mewing. Finally, a guy came in. After, like I say, about 4 hours of the kind of thing where my entire left side of my body hurt so bad that I couldn't remember anything before hurting that bad, and I couldn't imagine a future beyond hurting this bad. Anyway, this guy came along and gave me this injection of something and put it in the IV bag, and in the space of about 60 seconds or less, I just felt it like go away. And I said, "What is this stuff?" And he said, it's Dilaudid, which apparently is a pretty high power narcotic. And I said, "Man, if I ever have kids, I'm naming my first boy or girl Dilaudid, because this is so comforting." So this is where grief drives people. And I guess the thing I'm trying to deal with today in terms of our audience and why we're talking about it is not to make it into a pity party so much as to understand the mechanism of people who are not addicts, how healthy people deal with grief. And I think the only way to describe it is that an addiction is a way around the grief. It's a way to not deal with it. When somebody suffers a horrific trauma, often the first thing they'll do is sedate them for 24, 48 hours because grief could practically kill them. But it seems to me that healthy people allow themselves to feel the grief. They don't try to medicate it because they know that's just not only delaying it, but making it worse. They kind of just clench their teeth and walk through it. And I think the one thing that dealing with this ongoing depression has taught me and has given me enormous comfort, really, is the understanding that while I may not be able to do anything about this right now, I know now what I didn't know before, and that is that this will end. This will end. Sometimes it comes in like a storm off the Pacific Zone, and I just batten down and say I'm going to have a bad 3 days. But I know that at the end of 3 days, I'll be fine again. I'll be happy again. And I guess the willingness to walk through it. And I'm talking again. This is like I said, it's a political show. This isn't a personal therapy session for either one of us. So on a political level, I think for those of you out there who feel as much grief as I do about the state of the country, the future of the country, the state of young people, all of it. I think on some level, we have to steel ourselves to walk through it and feel it, not just face it, but feel it, because I'm utterly convinced that the people who are out to destroy our freedoms and take our choice away from us in life are using grief as a weapon. I think it is absolutely 100% conscious. I think it is acutely well targeted. And the problem with not walking through the grief is while you're in a state of grief, you're utterly incapacitated. And that's what they want. And that's what they want right now especially, is they want people incapacitated during this power grab. And that's why I wanted to talk about this today. Definitely,
man. And it's, you could see that, I reckon it's in the First Amendment. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about grief or grievances. This abuse of the First Amendment to make this redress of grievances, right? And people have taken that and they've perverted what that means. And it's fitting, of course, that you're talking about grief because that's what people want these, a lot of these legislations based on. It's like, I've got a grievance here and everybody has to live by other people's grievances. You could see that, in it's, I know people may see this strange when the Lord talks about in the end time, when the days of the Lord comes, when this stuff comes to an end, it's going to be like the days of Noah. It's going to be people, they're going to be eating and they're going to be drinking and they're going to be given over into marriage and all that sort of stuff. It's like, wait a minute. Okay, God, explain to me how is eating this thing that's so bad where you got to bring the end of the world? Why is it that drinking wine? Jesus, you drank wine. Why is drinking wine so bad? Why is marriage bad? Because of people seeking fulfillment in these things. When people seek fulfillment in drink, they drink to a point of drunkenness. They don't drink just, to have something to complement their meal. So they abuse the drinking. They abuse the food. Look at how we do food. Food is frankenfood now. It's like the nourishment that we get from food because people want to eat all the time and people have to keep the shelves stocked and pump them with a whole bunch of preservatives because to just have nice natural food up there would just be way too expensive. So
yeah, and I've heard there's like an enormous amount of like corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup in steak.
Yes.
In things that you could never possibly imagine.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm with you, man.
Yeah, it's so the Lord is saying, yeah, people are going to be seeking fulfillment of these things and it's going to be very toxic. Marriage, the same thing. Marriage has become something that's redefined. It doesn't work in nature. It doesn't work in the laws of physics. It just doesn't work. There is a specific design to marriage, but you're going to have people going to say, no, I want everybody else to endorse and live by what we think that marriage is outside of the natural design of it. So when you have these things happening, these are all elements of people making other people live by their grievances. This is why the commandments say, you shall have no other gods before you, and you will not let them make you bow down to them. Well, the state is an authoritative figure of God, not in a deistic sense, but authoritative figure. And the state has made it legal. We're under the legality of people saying that this is what I want and you have to live by it. When people are seeking fulfillment in self-medicating, right? So now we've got, and it's sad because a lot of people think that this is liberty. It's not liberty. It's legal.
No, it's slavery. It's the worst slavery on earth.
It's legal.
Addiction is the worst slavery in the world.
Yes, right. It's legalizing dependence is what we've done. And some people that think that this is liberating legislation. It's like, no, it's not. So sadly, these are the places that we are. And even just to get back, and people will seek fulfillment in trying to handle their grievance with their pets, and you have to let them come on with their emotional animal and stuff like that. And Bill, we understand, man, the power of having pets. It's we love our animals, and the people even wonder. It's like, well, when we die, do we get to see our pets and stuff like that? And people actually wrestle with that. It's like, yeah, actually, it's not really a stretch. The first job given to Adam was a farmer, right? So he worked around animals. The Lord himself is coming back on a white horse. So I don't think it's a stretch to say that there's going to be animals and stuff like that. But even the Lord knows the power of that. That's why he frowns on and shows, because people, when they worship idols and pagan idols and stuff like that, they're usually animal figures. So, and when people make their sacrifices, human sacrifices, like whether it be to Molech or Baal or Chemosh or something like that, these are animal-headed figures. So people have to be careful in their love for their animals to a point of idolatry, because history has shown that this is how far people will go in seeking their fulfillment. And the reason why I say that, Bill, is because this is what happens. The fulfillment that people are seeking and the grievance that people are seeking, that they make other people have to live under their legal, they've made their grievances legal for people to live under, that's why God is like, look, don't have any other gods before me. Do not seek fulfillment in other things, because when you do, these are the things that will happen, and oppression and murder will be the law of the land.
I think just in closing, I'll just say this, it's an old saw, and it's the advice or at least the comfort you often hear from people. And if you're dealing specifically with pets, and I want to get to the politics to wrap this up, but if you're dealing specifically with pets, the saying is, it's 10,000 great days and one really, really bad one. And that's so fundamentally true that it really contains its own answer in it. When I try to comfort myself over these things, or when I try to comfort my loved ones and the people who are feeling as much grief as I am, the only thing I can ever really come down to is to say, this is what it costs. This is what the pet costs. This is what the relative costs. This is the cost. All of this joy and all of this happiness that you've gotten, and all the reasons you're so sad and filled with grief, is because of the loss of these things in the future or in the present. And that crippling sense of sadness is the loss of pleasure. But this is what it costs. You can avoid grieving over a pet by not having any pets. That's the best way to do it. If you don't ever have an animal or a dog or a cat or whatever, a parakeet, it doesn't matter. If you don't ever love anybody, then you never have to worry about grieving over a loved one. This is the price. This is what it costs. And it is a heavy price, and it should be, because it's a very, very big gift. And again, since this is essentially a political show, for those of you who are feeling grief about everything that's happening around us in the country, I think that advice holds. This is what it costs. If you are born into a society where you are born into a slave or a totalitarian state, then watching that state crumble and watching things decay does not fill you with grief, because you haven't gotten any joy out of it. The grief we feel watching the destruction of the country comes from the joy that we've had living in a country like this. And it's what it costs. And just to close this whole thought up, if we let that grief incapacitate us, and as Zoe pointed out, if we become addicted to the grief, if grief becomes our identity, if we become a nation of people who say this used to be a great country, then we have trapped ourselves inside of a whirlpool that can be swum out of on the other side. And I think in many cases that is exactly the intention. So we just have to do what adults do, what free people do. We have to look at it and we have to say, I don't want to go there. I really, really, really don't want to go to this place, but I'm going anyway. And I'm going, I'm not going around, and I'm not going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to go right through it now because there is another side to it. Mm-hmm. There is the other side. This is what it costs. So let's pay the bill. And then let's move on with our lives and let's do what we can to rebuild these things so that our children and their children have a chance to experience the joy that we've experienced for most of our lives. That'll do it for this edition of the Virtue Signal, made possible by the members here at BillWhittle.com. I'm enormously grateful to the members and of course, to the new members that we got for being able to use those resources to bring my friend Alfonso Rachel into this mix. Not only does he provide a lot of really interesting things to say, and I know the people watching him are very happy with him, but I get so much out of you personally, buddy, just talking to you about these things, even talking about them on air. It's a real blessing for me and for our members as well. So thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time on The Virtue Signal.